They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But let me tell you something. Success tastes even better when it's served on a silver platter. While the people who betrayed you are drowning in their own mistakes. My name is Caroline Mitchell. And at 67 years old, my husband of 42 years walked out of our home. Our marriage and our life together. His destination. The bed of the woman I called my best friend for nearly 3 decades. 6 months later I watched through tears as they exchanged vows. At a courthouse wedding I learned about through Facebook. But here's what they didn't see coming. Here's what nobody saw coming. Including me today. 5 years later I'm sitting in my lakefront home. Not the cramped 2-bedroom ranch David and I shared. But a custom-built contemporary. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. My business partner Pamela's ex-husband Richard. Our company worth $8.3 million and growing. And David and Pamela, well, they're discovering that building a marriage on betrayal creates a foundation about as stable as quicksand. This is my story, and if you're going through something similar, or if you've ever felt like your life was over when someone walked away, I need you to hear every word. Because what happened to me could happen to you in the best possible way. Let me take you back to where this all began. It was September 2019. I had just turned 67 and David was 68. We'd been married since I was 25 years old. A lifetime together. We'd raised 3 children in our modest home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'd worked as a school secretary for 30 years. Before retiring at 62. David had been an accountant at a local manufacturing firm. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. At least I thought we were. Pamela Jennings had been my best friend since 1992. We met at a PTA meeting when our daughters were in 3rd grade together. She was vibrant, funny, and always dressed like she'd stepped out of a Talbot's catalog. Her husband Richard ran a small commercial printing business. The kind that made business cards, brochures and promotional materials. Pamela herself was a real estate agent, though she was semi-retired by the time all of this happened. The 4 of us, David, Pamela, Richard and I, we were inseparable. Friday night dinners, vacation trips to Door County, Wisconsin. Holiday parties, our kids grew up together. We celebrated anniversaries together. We were there for each other. Through Richard's father's death. Through my mother's battle with breast cancer. Through David's knee replacement surgery. I trusted these people with my life. That's what makes betrayal so devastating. Isn't it? It's not just the act itself. It's the shattering of everything you believe to be true. The first crack in my reality came on a Tuesday evening in September. David said he was going to Home Depot to pick up some supplies for a shelf he was building in the garage. Nothing unusual. He'd been doing little projects around the house since retirement. But something made me glance at his iPad on the kitchen counter. Before he left, it was still open to his messages. I wasn't snooping, I want to be clear about that. The screen was lit up. And I saw a message notification from P that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. My love, my love." My hands went cold, my heart started hammering in my chest so hard. I thought I might pass out. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a spam message, maybe a wrong number. But I knew David's contacts. P was Pamela. I'd seen it 100 times when she texted him about dinner plans. Or when they were coordinating our get-togethers. David came back into the kitchen. He'd forgotten his wallet. He saw me standing there, saw his iPad in my hands. And the color drained from his face. Caroline, I can explain those 4 words. Every betrayed spouse has heard them. And they're always followed by explanations that explain nothing. An excuse everything. He confessed right there in our kitchen. Standing by the refrigerator. Where we'd hung our grandchildren's drawings with magnets. He'd been having an affair with Pamela for 8 months. It had started, he claimed, Innocently enough, Pamela had been having problems with Richard. She needed someone to talk to. David was there. One thing led to another, one thing led to another. As if a decades-long friendship and a 42-year marriage could dissolve because of happenstance. As if vows and loyalty were just suggestions that could be abandoned. When one thing led to another. I asked him if Richard knew. He said no. I asked him if he loved her. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. He did. Or at least he thought he did. I asked him if he wanted a divorce. He said yes, just like that. Yes, no fight for our marriage. No counseling, no attempt to repair what he'd broken. Just yes. He moved out 3 days later. Packed his clothes, his golf clubs, his collection of old vinyl records, and left. 42 years reduced to boxes in the back of a U-Haul truck. The next 2 weeks were the darkest of my life. I barely ate, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. reaching for him, forgetting for just a moment that he was gone. Then reality would crash over me like a wave. And I'd lie there in the dark, wondering what I'd done wrong. Wondering if I'd been boring. If I'd let myself go, if I'd been a bad wife. My daughter Jennifer came to stay with me. She was furious with her father. But I could see the pain in her eyes too. Her family was breaking apart. Her father had done something unthinkable. Mom, you need to tell Richard, she said to me one morning over coffee. I'd thought about it. God, had I thought about it, but the idea of making that phone call, of telling a man I'd known for nearly 30 years that his wife was sleeping with my husband. It felt impossible. How do you find those words? But Jennifer was right. Richard deserved to know. I called him on a Sunday afternoon. He answered cheerfully, asking if Pamela and I wanted to come over for dinner that week, like we usually did. Richard, I said, my voice shaking, I need to tell you something. And it's going to hurt. David and Pamela are having an affair. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long. I thought the call had dropped. Richard, are you there? How long? His voice was hollow. David says 8 months. I just found out 2 weeks ago. 8 months. He repeated it like he was trying to make sense of a foreign language. 8 months, and I had no idea. Caroline, I had absolutely no idea. We talked for an hour. Richard told me that Pamela had been distant lately. But he'd attributed it to stress with work. She'd been taking more evening appointments with clients. She'd joined a gym and was gone for hours at a time. All the clichés of an affair. And he'd missed every single one. He confronted her that night. She didn't deny it. From what Richard told me later, she'd actually seemed relieved to have it out in the open. She wanted a divorce too. She was in love with David. They were going to build a life together. I felt sick, not just for myself, but for Richard. 2 marriages destroyed. 2 families fractured, and for what? For some fantasy of new love in their late 60s. The divorce proceedings were brutal in their efficiency. David wanted it done quickly. I didn't fight him. What was the point? You can't force someone to love you. You can't chain someone to a marriage they're desperate to leave. We divided our assets. The house went to me. He didn't want it anyway, he said. Too many memories. Our retirement accounts were split. 42 years neatly divided into columns on a spreadsheet. Richard's divorce was equally swift. Pamela was eager to move forward with her new life. 6 months after David walked out of our kitchen with his confession, he and Pamela got married. A small courthouse ceremony. I found out about it when my friend Linda sent me a screenshot from Facebook. Pamela had posted a photo of them signing the marriage license. Both of them grinning like teenagers. Beginning our new adventure together. The caption read, followed by a string of heart emojis. I stared at that photo for a long time. David looked happy, genuinely happy. That's what hurt most, not that he'd left, but that he seemed so much better off without me. I cried for 3 days straight. It was during that dark period that Richard showed up at my door. With a bottle of wine and a proposition. I almost didn't answer when the doorbell rang. I was in sweatpants and an old t-shirt. My hair unwashed, tissues scattered around the living room. But I looked through the peephole and saw Richard standing there. And something about his face. The same devastated exhaustion I saw in my own mirror. Made me open the door. I couldn't be alone tonight. He said simply, I thought maybe you couldn't either. We sat in my living room and drank that bottle of wine. Then we opened another one from my cabinet. We talked about everything. The betrayal, the humiliation. The way people looked at us with pity at the grocery store. The way mutual friends didn't know what to say. And sometimes crossed the street to avoid the awkward conversation. I keep wondering what I did wrong. Richard said, refilling his glass. I gave her everything, built a good life. Was faithful, loved her. And it wasn't enough. I know exactly what you mean. I said, I've replayed 42 years in my head. Looking for the moment I failed. When did I stop being enough? You didn't fail, Caroline. Richard looked at me with bloodshot eyes. They failed. They're the ones who broke their vows. Who betrayed trust, who blew up everything. For what? Some midlife crisis. Some fantasy that new love will be better than built love. Built love, I repeated. I like that phrase. My grandmother used to say that love isn't just a feeling. It's a house you build together. Brick by brick, year by year. What Pamela and David have isn't built love. It's just infatuation with a new coat of paint. We talked until 2 a.m. and somewhere in that conversation, something shifted. The weight I'd been carrying felt a little lighter. Because I wasn't alone, someone understood. Someone was in the same boat. Rowing through the same storm. Richard started coming over once a week. We'd have dinner, watch old movies. Talk about our kids and our lives. It wasn't romantic, neither of us were ready for that. And maybe we never would be. But it was companionship, it was understanding. It was healing. 3 months into our friendship, Richard mentioned his printing business was struggling. Digital marketing had taken over. And fewer businesses needed traditional printed materials. He was thinking about selling it or just closing up shop. What if you didn't close it? I asked. What if you pivoted? To what I'd been doing, research online. Partly to distract myself from my depression. Partly because I needed something to do with my days. I'd stumbled across articles about the growing market for personalized memory books, custom photo albums, and legacy printing services. Seniors, I said. People our age, we have a lifetime of photos. But they're either rotting in boxes or trapped in hard drives. What if we helped people create beautiful, professionally printed memory books? Family histories, legacy albums. Something they can pass down to their grandchildren. Richard leaned forward, interested. Keep talking, think about it. Our generation isn't as tech-savvy as our kids. But we have the stories, the photos. We want to preserve them. But we don't know how we could offer a full-service experience. People send us their photos and stories. We design beautiful books and we print them. High-quality archival paper. Professional binding, something that will last for generations. That's actually brilliant. Richard said slowly, I have all the printing equipment. I just need to upgrade a few things for higher quality photo printing. But Caroline, do you know anything about design? About running a business? No. I admitted, but I can learn. And I was a school secretary for 30 years. I know how to organize, manage schedules. Deal with people. I can handle the business side while you handle the printing side. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we be partners. Equal partners, 50-50. He extended his hand. Let's do it. We shook on it right there in my living room. Looking back, it was probably crazy. 2 heartbroken people in their late 60s. Starting a business together. With no real plan and no business experience between us. But sometimes crazy is exactly what you need. We named the company Legacy Memories. Richard took out a loan against his printing business to upgrade equipment and rent a small office space. I invested $15,000 from my divorce settlement. It was a risk at my age. I couldn't afford to lose that money. But something inside me had awakened. A determination I didn't know I possessed. I was tired of being the victim. Tired of crying, tired of feeling like my life was over. I was 68 years old and I was starting over. And damn it, I was going to succeed. The first 3 months were brutal. We created a website though neither of us knew what we were doing. We designed sample books. We reached out to senior centers, retirement communities and local libraries to offer free workshops on preserving family memories. Our first client was a 73-year-old woman named Dorothy, whose husband had recently passed away. She had boxes and boxes of photos. Their wedding, their 5 children growing up, vacations, holidays, birthdays. She wanted to create a memory book for each of her kids. I spent hours with Dorothy going through those photos, listening to her stories. Each picture had a tale. This was taken the day Tommy got his driver's license. This was from their 25th anniversary trip to Hawaii. This was little Sarah's first day of kindergarten. I helped her organize them chronologically. Write captions, choose meaningful quotes. When Richard delivered the finished books 2 weeks later, Dorothy cried. She held those books like they were treasures. Because they were, we'd taken her memories and made them tangible, permanent, beautiful. This is the most precious gift I've ever given my children. She told us thank you. That's when I knew we had something special. Word spread quickly. Dorothy told her friends. Her friends told their friends. We started getting calls from people all over Michigan, then from neighboring states. Our little operation grew beyond what we'd imagined. I learned graphic design through online tutorials, staying up until midnight practicing layouts and photo editing. Richard brought in a young designer named Marcus, who taught us about color theory and modern design aesthetics. We hired 2 part-time employees to help with customer service and photo scanning. But the real magic wasn't in the technical side. It was in the stories. Every client brought us their lives, in boxes and envelopes and thumb drives. And I got to know each one. I'd spend hours on the phone with them, asking questions, drawing out details. When did you meet your husband? What was your mother like? Tell me about the house you grew up in. I wasn't just creating books. I was preserving legacies. I was honoring lives lived. And in doing so I was healing my own wounds. Each story reminded me that life was bigger than my pain. That love and loss and joy and heartbreak were universal human experiences, that I wasn't alone in my suffering. And I wouldn't be alone in my recovery. By the end of the first year, Legacy Memories had generated $180,000 in revenue. We were profitable, not rich, but successful. More importantly, we'd found purpose. Richard and I made a good team. He handled the production and technical side, while I managed client relationships and business operations. We complemented each other's strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. And slowly, without either of us quite realizing it was happening, we became more than business partners. We became friends, real friends, built on respect and shared experience, and genuine care for each other. In year 2 we expanded our services. We started offering video digitization, helping people convert old VHS tapes and film reels into digital formats. We created a line of memorial books for funeral homes. We developed partnerships with genealogy services to help people create comprehensive family history books. We also started hosting memory preservation workshops at community centers and libraries. I'd stand in front of rooms full of seniors and teach them how to organize their photos, how to interview family members for stories, how to preserve fragile documents. These workshops became incredibly popular. Not just because people wanted to preserve their memories, but because they craved connection and community. Many of the people who attended were like me, divorced, widowed or alone. They'd show up with their boxes of photos and leave with friends and plans to meet for coffee. Our business became more than a service. It became a gathering place for people rediscovering themselves in later life. Richard and I moved into a larger facility. We hired 6 full-time employees and a dozen part-timers. We invested in state-of-the-art printing equipment. We launched a sophisticated website with online ordering capabilities. By the end of year 2, our revenue hit $650,000. We were featured in a Grand Rapids magazine article about successful local businesses. People started recognizing me at the grocery store. Not as the woman whose husband left her, but as the founder of Legacy Memories. That shift in identity was profound. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I was building. Running a successful business changed me in ways I never expected. I became more confident, more assertive. I learned to trust my instincts and make tough decisions. I had to negotiate contracts, manage employees, deal with difficult clients. None of this came naturally to me. I'd spent my career as a school secretary, where my job was to support others, not to lead, but I discovered I was good at leadership. I was good at seeing the big picture while managing details. I was good at making people feel heard and valued. All those years of supporting teachers and students and administrators had taught me skills I didn't know I possessed. My relationship with Richard evolved too. We weren't just business partners. We were genuinely close friends. We celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through challenges, and understood each other's pain in ways no one else could. People occasionally asked if we were dating. We weren't. Neither of us were interested in romantic relationships. We'd both been so deeply wounded that the idea of opening our hearts again felt impossible. But we had something deeper than romance. We had partnership, trust, and mutual respect forged in fire. My children were amazed by my transformation. Jennifer told me she was proud of me. My son Michael, who'd been distant during the divorce, started calling more often. My youngest Amy brought her kids by the office to see what Grandma was building. Mom Jennifer said to me one evening over dinner, "You seem happier than I've seen you in years." Even before Dad left, she was right. I was happy, not despite what happened, but somehow because of it. The betrayal had destroyed my old life, but it had forced me to build a new one. And this new life was entirely mine. Of course, living in the same city as David and Pamela meant I occasionally ran into them. The first time was at a restaurant. About 18 months after the wedding. I was there with Richard and Marcus, celebrating landing a big contract with a senior living community chain. I saw them across the room before they saw me. David and Pamela sitting in a corner booth. They weren't smiling. David looked tired. Older than I remembered. Pamela was talking animatedly, gesturing with her hands. And David was staring at his plate with an expression I knew well. That's the look he got when he wanted to be anywhere but where he was. Then Pamela looked up and saw me. Her face flushed. She leaned across the table and said something to David. He turned, saw me, and went pale. I could have looked away, could have pretended I didn't see them. But something in me had changed. I wasn't the devastated, crying woman anymore. I was Caroline Mitchell, successful business owner. I held David's gaze for a moment, then smiled, not a warm smile, but not a hostile one either. Just an acknowledgement. I see you. I'm fine, I'm better than fine. Then I turned back to my dinner companions and continued our celebration. That took guts, Richard said quietly. No. I said it took healing. The encounters became more frequent as time went on. We lived in a mid-sized city. You couldn't avoid people forever. I heard through mutual friends That David and Pamela's relationship wasn't the fairy tale they'd imagined. Apparently the excitement of an affair didn't translate well into the reality of daily life together. Who would have thought? Pamela had expected David to be romantic and attentive, the way he'd been during their affair. But David was just David. A creature of habit who liked his routines and his quiet time. The man who snuck around with her during stolen afternoon hours was the same man who now fell asleep in his recliner. By 8 p.m. David had expected Pamela to be exciting and spontaneous. But Pamela was high maintenance and demanding, constantly wanting to go places and do things, and prove to everyone that their relationship was wonderful. The fantasy woman he'd risked everything for was just another flawed human being, with annoying habits and insecurities. I didn't take pleasure in their struggles. Not exactly, but I won't lie. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that what they'd destroyed my life for wasn't the paradise they'd imagined. Year 3 was when everything exploded in the best possible way. We were approached by a national senior living corporation that owned facilities across 15 states. They wanted to offer Legacy Memories services to all their residents. Over 50,000 seniors. The contract was worth $2.4 million over 3 years. Richard and I sat in my office after the signing, just staring at each other in disbelief. We did it, he said. We actually did it, I whispered. That contract changed everything. We had to scale up dramatically. We moved into a 10,000 square foot facility. We hired a full staff including a CEO to help manage operations. We invested in commercial-grade equipment. We developed a training program so we could replicate our services across multiple locations. My salary went from modest to substantial. Richard and I were each drawing 6-figure incomes. At 71 years old, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible. But more than the money, it was the impact. We were now preserving memories for thousands of people. We were employing 40 people, most of them in our community. We'd created something meaningful. I bought my lake house that year. The custom contemporary I mentioned at the start. It was everything my old house wasn't: modern, spacious, filled with light. I furnished it exactly how I wanted, without compromise or consideration for anyone else's taste. Every room was mine. I also started traveling. Richard and I took a trip to Italy. Not as a couple but as friends. Celebrating our success, we ate pasta in Rome, toured vineyards in Tuscany, and laughed until our sides hurt. Life had become full again, rich, meaningful. Year 4 brought unexpected drama. I heard through the grapevine that David and Pamela were having serious financial troubles. Pamela had quit her real estate job to focus on the marriage. But that meant they were living on just David's pension and Social Security. They'd taken out a reverse mortgage on the house. Pamela got in her divorce from Richard, and now they were struggling with those payments. Meanwhile, Richard and I had been featured in several business publications. Our success was public knowledge. It was impossible to miss if you lived in Grand Rapids. I knew it must be eating at David. His wife, his former wife, was now a millionaire businesswoman. The woman he'd left because she was boring and stuck in routine had completely transformed her life. And he was stuck with the reality of the choice he'd made. Then one day David called me. I hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. "Caroline," he said, his voice uncertain, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me." "What do you want, David?" "I heard about your business. About how successful you've become. I'm really happy for you." I waited. There was more, there was always more. Things have been tough for Pam and me financially. I was wondering if maybe Legacy Memories might need an accountant. Part-time, I could help with the books. And no, I said firmly, "Caroline, please. I know I hurt you, but we spent 42 years together. That has to count for something. I'm struggling here and you're doing so well. And I just thought you thought what, David? That I owe you something, that I should give you a job. After what you did. I thought you might be willing to help an old friend. I laughed, I actually laughed. We're not friends, David. We're not anything, you made your choice. You left me for Pamela, you built your new life. Now live it, don't call me again. I hung up, my hands were shaking. But I felt powerful, I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be the understanding, accommodating Caroline who put everyone else's needs first. Richard hugged me when I told him about the call. I'm proud of you, he said. By year 5, Legacy Memories was valued at $8.3 million. We'd been approached by several companies interested in buying us out. Richard and I discussed it seriously. We could sell, walk away with millions. Retire in comfort, but we realized we didn't want to. This business wasn't just about money. It was about purpose. It was about the clients who cried when they received their books. It was about the employees who told us this was the best job they'd ever had. It was about the community we'd built. We decided to keep growing instead. I was now 72 years old. Richard was 73. We were supposed to be winding down, preparing for our final years. Instead, we were building, expanding, planning for the future. My children couldn't believe the transformation. Mom Amy said during a family dinner,